Hey, good morning. This will be daily yap number 10 actually. I misnamed the last one. It was number 9, not number 8. It feels weird, like 10 is a small number, but it's like the first 2-digit number. So it's like, this has become a series, which is interesting. I've struggled to make this for so long. But anyway, enough yap about that. So today I want to talk about a point that I've experienced in my current job. I work currently for LATAM, not hired by LATAM as an external, but for LATAM Airlines, that is, so the biggest airline in all of Latin America. And it's a big corporation. So basically, I've been working on corporate for a long time, in a corporate environment, that is. And one thing that I've realized is that bad managers are rarely punished, or they rarely face the consequences of their own incompetence. So why is this? Well, first of all, I don't think that managers are completely useless. I think it's only a fool would think that you can have a company with like hundreds of engineers, people that actually code and do stuff, and have like no managers at all. Now that's not realistic. You do need some managers. However, you don't need sometimes as many as there are. But going back to the point, why is it that bad managers seem to be such a common thing? And even not like just bad managers, but also like, the ones that are like just good enough, like you have like good, medium, and bad. And you have, it would seem to me, like a lot of the bad managers part and a lot of just like mid managers. So why is this? Well, I like to think of the manager as someone that is like a multiplier for the effort of the team. So you have these two parts. First part is the manager, and the second part is the team. And you can have both good managers, bad managers, medium managers, and good teams, medium teams, and bad teams. And when I talk about good or bad teams, I'm not talking about the specific skills of the individuals of the team, but I'm talking about how the team works as a whole. I've worked in many places already, and I've realized that the team by itself can do actually a lot of difference and a lot of work that the manager sometimes should do. If you have a good team, you're always like communicating and telling each other like, yeah man, like I need this, or like, hey, do you think that this will be a problem? Once again, like keep in mind, this is all like in the software environment. Maybe it works different in other industries, but I'm talking about mine in this video. So if you think about it, you could say that bad managers and bad teams are like a 0.5, the mid ones are just a 1, and the good ones can be like a 2 times or like 1.5, right? So like increasing the amount of work. So how do those combinations look like? Well, let's start with like the very mid, like if you have a mid team and you have mid manager, you will get the job done. You will do 1 times 1, which is 1, and you will just, do what's needed. It won't be like, the best work in the life. It won't be like the highlights of the company, but it's going to get the job done. Now, what happens when you have, for example, a good team and a bad manager, which is what I think that happens, pretty often, is that the team by itself, it could do like a times 2, it could do like some amazing work. But then you have this really incompetent manager, and this incompetent manager is going to be like a 0.5. So the thing is that because the team is so great, but the manager is so bad, the team only gets the job done, And sure, like in that case, right, the bad manager doesn't face the consequences because it has a team that's backing him or she up. And I think that that's exactly the problem, is that the manager's work are based on the team results and not so much on the manager's impact. And I think that people mistake the team's output with the manager's impact, or like what the effect was of having that manager. And that's the thing, like nobody stops asking like, hey, what if we just take the team and not taking into consideration the manager? Is the team like a mid team, like a good team, a bad team? But people don't do that. They just take a look at this multiplication. So what happens, of course, in the best case scenario, like if you have a great manager, which I've had, and you have a great team, The team does like 4 times the amount of work that another team do, or like 3 times, right? You do things with high impact, you do it with good quality, you do it at decent speed. And at that point is where, everyone gets praise. That's great. Oh, you guys did good. But also, like, think about it. Like, okay, what happens? Another combination. What happens when you still have a good team, but you have a mid manager? A good team is like a 2, but manager is like a 1. So 2 times 1, it's still 2. The team will still be like a good performance overall for the company. The team will still do something great, but not because of the manager. Like, the manager did nothing but being decent, but by doing the minimum that's expected from he or she. And like, that's the thing, like the scale, the system is rigged. Is rigged in the manager's favor. Because, okay, also you have, the one case where actually the manager is deserving of having the credit, which is when you have a good manager and a mid team, or when you have a good manager and a bad team. A good manager can make a bad team work, just being like really organized, telling them what to do, having that good vision. And when you have a good manager and a mid team as well, things will go like great. And in that case, the manager will get like all the glory. I'm once again, I'm missing my words, but that's what I mean, like the recognition, that's what I want to say. And if you think about it, okay, what happens when you have, mid and bad? So what happens when you have like a mid manager and a bad team? Bad team will be like 0.5, mid manager will be like a 1, that multiply gives you 0.5. In those cases, or also the other case, when you have like a bad manager and just a mid team, you will still get the 0.5 of output. And that will raise some alarms. But unless you're in a really like high stress and like high stakes and like a technical level, where they expect a lot of you, usually that will go as, yeah, we're not meeting expectations, try more like next time. And unless you have like a really long bad streak of those, you will not face the consequences right away. It's not like people will say, oh yeah, you didn't like do as well here, but you actually still did like around half, maybe a little bit more than half the job. You can keep going, like the manager in that case is like, okay, you don't get the glory, you don't get recognition, but you also don't get too much consequences besides you need to improve. So you can stay in that manager position, which is a thing that in my opinion doesn't happen as much with people of the team. If someone underperforms, of course, for one sprint, for 1 month, it's not a big deal. But if it's already like 2 months, people are already talking about like changing that person. Like, I know, like I've been in those discussions, and that's the thing, like it's such a rigged and bad system against the employee, the guys, the guys that actually do the work, not the guys that are organizing the work. And lastly, well, you have the last case, which is the worst case, which is what happens when you have a bad team. And once again, I'm not talking about the individuals on the team, but I'm talking about how do they work as a team, and a bad manager. When you have that is when actually some heads start rolling, right? Because 0.5 times 0.5 is 0.25, so a quarter of the expected work, and that won't go unnoticed. But again, like that's such a, like if you think that all of this is like perfectly random, that's a 1 in 9 case. For the other like 8 cases, the manager is either like, mid, like, it's like okay, or it's getting glorified, despite the actual difference that manager makes. And by the way, when I'm talking about managers, I'm talking about like C-levels, team leads, and, bosses, all of that, people that don't actually do the work, but organize people to do the work. So yeah, I'm talking about all of this from my experience, like working. I've been working already for like 5 years. And in this last almost 2 years, I've been working in this big company, in this corporate world. And I've been talking with people, and a lot of people say the same, it's like, oh yeah, this is a good boss, this is a bad boss. And like people, that's also what's crazy, that people like seem to know. But the problem with these corporate things is that it's a lot of like people just trying to survive in the corporate world, and not so much like adding value to the world or the company. It's more like, what can I do so that I don't lose my job, and or what can I do so that I keep growing with the rules of this environment. And to do that, a lot of the times it's not doing what's most valuable, but doing what gets you more exposure. Which once again is sad because like you're at that point you're missing the point, right? Like I'm a professional, and of course most of my colleagues are professionals as well. That means like we went to the university, we studied really hard, things that were like totally unrelated to what we do right now, like thermodynamics and like differential equations. So why did you accumulate all this knowledge? You accumulated all this knowledge because this knowledge, these skills will be useful so that you can do in the world things that other people can't do, right? And I know that there's a lot of unprofessional people. Sorry, not unprofessional, that's bad. Like people without a professional degree that can code and can code pretty well. I know my Facebook manager at one point was like that. He came out of a boot camp. So I'm not saying like other people can't, but if we look at the world, like who builds, most of the buildings? It's not going to be random people, it's going to be engineers, right? Who creates actually like stuff, and once again, it's mostly like engineers. At least I'm talking once again in my field, and it will work different for other fields, but in my field of engineering. And that's the thing, like you should do what brings the most value, not what only benefits you the most, but the ways that systems are created don't incentivize that. And a lot of the times people that do want to make a difference, they are not as seen or they don't get as glorified. Whereas people that just, play the political game, which is so sad, honestly, it's so sad that corporations that, okay, I get it for like the government because that's what it is. That's where it comes from. But, for companies that they are trying to like, create stuff or like create value, it's so sad that you still have to play the political game. But yeah, I mean, I won't be naming names, but in my last job, I was in one team and the manager was awful, like awful. And I was like, dude, like why? It was so obvious that she was so much worse than the people that she was directing, right? So us, like the devs, we knew so much more than her. And I do believe that any four of us, at that point we were four in the team, would do a better job than her at doing what she was doing. So I was like, okay, this was clearly a mistake, but then why would they hire someone who wasn't even an engineer? She was a designer. And I was like, why would you put like as a tech lead a designer that doesn't freaking code? And then we realized that, the reason it's because she had been building this image that, I go and I'm a speaker. I'm a speaker for like the JS conference and stuff like that. And well, she was, to be perfectly honest, she was. I don't know how good of a speaker she was, but that's the thing, it's like she built an image, and with that image came exposure, and with that exposure came the notion that she was qualified enough to guide a team, when in reality it wasn't that way. And that's when you wonder, like, and she was a bad manager, and man, she was bad, she wasn't like, like me, she was bad as a manager. And she even stayed for like more than a year in the company. Why did she stay more than a year in the company? Well, it was because whoever hired her didn't want to fire her right away, because that would be like a bad political move, because at that moment you needed political capital, how my friends and my colleagues describe it. Which once again, as an engineer, that actually worries about like just making value, it's like, oh man. Like I can't find the words to describe it. It's disappointing, honestly. Yeah. I guess that's what it's closest to. But anyway, the dog's neighbor is bothering me, so I guess this has been Daily App number 10. Goodbye, I'll see you tomorrow.